Welcome to our next virtual summit. My name is Nicoletta Polano. I'm a senior compliance professional at Zurich Group, and I'm based in Zurich, Switzerland. I'm the next external connection lead and the organizer of this summit. Today, I will be the moderator of this event dedicated to the future of Earth, the third event of our next summit. The session will be organized as follows. Each speaker will give a keynote, and then we will open the floor for the discussion. In order to post your questions and comments, please enter them in the Q&A chat. I will pick them up and pass them to the speakers. I will then wrap up the session and seize the opportunity to present contents and speakers of the other summit events planned for this week. Now, let me introduce you the speakers of this event today. Karen MacClune, Master in Geology and PhD in Geophysics, glaciologist by training, private sector hydrologic consultant in experience. Now serving as Executive Director of ISET-International, a non-profit working in international development. Karen has experience in surface and groundwater hydrology, climate change science, and theory and practice of climate resilience, with hands-on experience on communicating and teaching associated science and policy issues to stakeholders. Gustav Stenbeck, entrepreneur, business angel, and keynote speaker. CEO at Mestro, tech scale-up focusing on automated and visualized monitoring for real estate to control energy consumption and costs. Investor in various tech and sustainability startups. Incurable tech optimist and evangelist for the business sustainability combo. Former corporate executive, he has 15 years worked in the area where business and sustainability intersect. David Nash, Senior Flood Resilience Alliance Manager for our Zurich Foundation, speaker in international settings and TEDx speaker. David has held several roles both within Zurich, first specializing in people and organizational development, then leading the Zurich Community Trust India program, but also within the Zurich Foundation. CEO of the Indian mental health NGO The Banyan between 2009 and 2013. After having introduced our speakers, we're ready to start. Karen, the stage is yours for your keynote.
Great, thanks, Nicoletta. So I'm a climate change scientist by training, and I just wanted to provide sort of the background from a science perspective on where we are with climate change, which is not good, as I think everyone is aware. So the science behind climate change has been really clear for about 50 years. It's not a new problem. We've known that it was coming. The problem is that we're only just now starting to see the impacts. And I think most of you have probably seen the classic hockey stick diagram where temperatures are sort of flat, slowly increasing, and then all of a sudden we hit just a crazy curve and it goes straight up, the hockey stick blade. And we're on that curve. And so now we're starting to see a change. The problem is that change is just going to go straight up soon. And we're really not ready for it. So, as we emit greenhouse gases, the atmosphere heats. We trap more heat. As a result, we get more intense rainfall, we get longer and deeper droughts, we get higher temperatures, but we also get just more variability. And that includes deeper freezes, sort of these really, sudden cold snap events. Our seas start going up, both because we're melting land-based ice, but also because we're just heating seawater and it expands. And the secondary impacts of what are really these first level impacts are things like heat waves. They're more intense flooding. It's bigger and wetter hurricanes. It's catastrophic wildfires. I'm based in the US and they're local. You know, those wildfires are 30 miles from my house right now, and we're dealing with the smoke every day. It's rising seas threatening coastal development. It's also cold snaps, droughts, and unexpected climate variability that are impacting agriculture and our ability to grow food. The climate globally has been phenomenally stable for the past 15,000 years. Since we came out of the last ice age, you know, we had a lot of climate variability, the temperatures came up, and then they just got flat. That's when civilization rose. And it's because of that climate stability that we've been able to develop civilization, that we've been able to develop agriculture and metalworking and shift from hunter-gatherer societies to settlements and towns and cities. And we're threatening that with climate change. So in areas like the Sahara, you know, areas like the Sahara cover 1% of the land surface of the globe right now. But by 2070, as a result of climate change, that could be 20% of our land surface. You know, we're dramatically shifting the conditions under which humanity has evolved to climate ecosystems that we don't know that we can live in. And so that's the challenge of climate change. Coupled with the fact that not only are we doing this, we're doing this over the next 100 years. So there's a level of incredible urgency around this, that we need to not only start mitigating our climate emissions, but we need to start adapting to the impacts that we're already seeing as a result of climate change. And we need realistically to have done it 50 years ago, but we're here today. And so we need to do it in the next 10 or 20 years if we want any hope of sort of retaining society the way we know it. And that means we also have a phenomenal opportunity right now. We know that we need really big changes. We need really decisive leadership. We need bold new ideas and bold new action. And we get to embrace that and work with it. And knowing that our next speaker is talking about the business opportunity there, I want to point out that I think businesses have the opportunity to really lead here. Governments, because they are elected, can only lead as fast as people are willing to follow, or they just get tossed out of office. Businesses have always provided global leadership. They are the ones that come up with brilliant new ideas and then explain to people why this is a product they want to buy. And so businesses, I think, should be on the front edge of a lot of this climate transition, that we've gotten as far as we can asking government to lead, and now we need businesses to step up. And for businesses to recognize that they want to step up because this is part of creating the enabling environment that will allow them to continue operating. If they've been in operation for 30 years, what will it take for them to be operating 30 years from now? The other reason businesses are really well positioned for this is because people know that businesses respond to financial pressure. And so if businesses aren't acting, it must not actually be a problem. When businesses begin acting, people will know why they're acting, and they'll see that, now it's our turn to step up. So with that, I will hand this over to Gustav, but I'm happy to take further questions on climate science.
Thank you very much, Karen, for your keynote. Yes, now it's Gustav's turn for his keynote. Gustav, the stage is yours.
Well, hi, everybody. I'm not sure what I can say that's better than what Karen just said. So I'm just going to basically do a mic drop and say what Karen said. I think it's really insightful. To start off, as Nicoletta said, I'm a business angel and an entrepreneur, and I only work where sustainability and business intersect. So essentially what that means is that I'm not interested in investing in a company or working with a company that only can do one of two things. and that is make money or make the world better. I don't want to make a choice. And I'm going to make 2 points on why I think this is important. But before I make those 2 points, I think I want to come back to something I've got written on the inside of my arm. Probably can't see, but if you can, it says, I want it all on the inside of my arm. And that is because I don't want to choose between sustainability and profits. I think one of the main drivers for changing society as it's been, viewed forever has been entrepreneurship and companies. And companies can really take the lead and do a lot of big changes. And if you can't do both, I think you're, as a company, going to be obsolete within 5 or 10 years from now. And I'm obviously putting my money where my mouth is. I'm not a fund manager, which means that I spend my own money on companies. I don't spend somebody else's money on the companies that I invest in. But I wanted to tell you something on the 2 things that I think are important. And that's why I'm kind of sitting hunched over this table. I was supposed to be in my office giving this keynote in front of a whiteboard. There's a basic problem with this, and that's that I've caught the cold during this weekend. I'm coming off the tail end, but I'm sitting here in a voluntary kind of quarantine, and I'm sitting in my wife's studio. So then I figured, no whiteboard. How am I going to do this? So I do what any resourceful speaker does. I raid the daughter's Lego drawer. So I'm going to give a keynote presentation with Legos, or I'm going to try to. So we'll see how this ends up. Okay. So I want to give you 2 reasons why companies are really important for changing the world. So the first one is I'm going to run through a quick list of some economies in the world. And I'm not talking GDP here. I'm talking revenues. So essentially, how much spare money does this country have to spend? So in revenues, how big are the countries? So here comes the Lego bricks, okay? So the first country I'm going to put in here is Greece. 1 brick equals approximately $100 billion. So Greece has a revenue of approximately $100 billion. So let's put the next country up. And I figured Switzerland might be a good company or country to put up here, right? So that's Switzerland. That's 2 bricks. Revenues of Switzerland is approximately $225 million US. I myself, I'm Swedish, and obviously Sweden is bigger than Switzerland. There's another brick there up top, which means that Sweden is actually having revenues of about $275 billion US. But then things kind of get moving, right? Here's another big country. This is Brazil. So green and yellow, right? So Brazil, they're turning over approximately, or they've got revenues of approximately $620 billion US. And Nicoletta, she said she was Italian. I went to business school in Italy. I have to have Italy as an example, right? And there's Italy. Italy has revenues of approximately $885 billion US. So here's a couple of big countries, right? Greece is number 30 in the world if you look at revenues. Switzerland is about 20, Sweden is at about 15, Brazil is at about 10, and Italy is the 7th biggest country in the world when it comes to revenues. But which one is the biggest? Whenever I ask this question when I give lectures, I get one of 2 answers. It's either China or the US. In order to represent them, I'm going to have to kind of change scales a bit here. So, okay, here are my countries. The biggest in the world is still the US. And I'm going to kind of put them on in steps here because the US is, well, kind of big. So obviously you can see I kind of ran out of bricks here, right? These are beautifully colored coordinated. This is just the rest of the drawer stacked together to kind of comprise the $6.6 trillion US that the US has in yearly revenue. So obviously huge kind of thing. You can see the top right. Oh shit. I have a trouble keeping the US together, much like the country itself in real life, actually. But here, the US obviously falling apart. But if you look at that, the US is huge compared to these other countries. But still, if you look at who has or which country has the biggest absolute reductions in CO2 emissions, it is the US. In the last year or even in the last 20 years. It doesn't matter which time scale you look on. And that's important because you have a president in the US that's for the past 4 years done his best to kind of roll back a lot of the wins that we've had in the climate accords. And yet, though his best intentions, he's not really being successful. The US is still decreasing their emissions. That was the first thing. Second one, I need to bring back my box. So here, boxes come back. I'm going to change scales now because this is going to become a little bit easier to see if I change the scale. So I'm going to double everything up. So that means that Greece now has 2 dots. It means that Switzerland has 4. Sweden has 5. So essentially the only thing that I'm doing is changing the scale. And then here comes Brazil. And then finally, here's Italy. Okay, so here we go. Here are the same 5 countries, right? So Greece, Switzerland, Sweden, Brazil, Italy. So 30, 20, 15, 10th, and 7th largest in the world. I'm going to bring in a new stack. This sucker right here. And this stack fits right in the middle here. So the question is, what is this stack? The one that's right now kind of sitting in the middle between Sweden and Brazil. I'm going to tell you. This is the revenues of Walmart, the largest private or public company in the world, Walmart. And when you look at it like this, right, it becomes a little bit scary because here you can see, okay, here's Greece, here's Switzerland, here's Sweden, and here's Walmart. And you can do another interesting thing. You can actually stack Sweden, Switzerland, and Greece on top of each other, and it's still only going to be equal. So here you've got one company in the US that has revenues that are larger than these 3 big European countries. And that is my second point. Politicians in the US are doing their best to kind of roll back things that will mitigate climate change. They're not doing a good job. Companies are changing anyways. And when you look at the actual money, who has the most money to spend, obviously when you look at this, Walmart's more important what policies they improve or what policies they introduce than Sweden, Switzerland, and Greece put together. And that is why I think companies are the future and the ones that are going to solve this problem. We're big, as in if you look at the world's 100 biggest economical entities, 70 of those are going to be companies, only 30 are going to be countries. So out of 100 biggest economical entities in the world, 70% are companies. So if you have your trust in that the politicians are going to actually solve the problems of climate change within the next 9.5 years, I think you're putting your trust in the wrong people. Companies need to step up. We're not doing it quite yet, but we're on the way of doing so. And obviously, if you're going to follow the money, companies are the ones with the biggest financial resources to actually do and be the change in the world that we want to see. So my mission in this world is to make sure that companies have the same thing tattooed on the inside of their arm. They want it all. They need to both be able to make money and make the world a better place simultaneously. And if they can't do both, well, I think they're going to go obsolete one way or the other within the next 5 to 10 years. I think my minutes are up. Thanks, guys. Handing it over to David.
Thank you, Gustav, for your very creative keynote. David, the stage is yours for your keynote.
Thank you, Nicoletta, and thanks, Gustav, for giving me something that I can't follow. Having props is always a good trick to play to get the attention of the audience, and that's fantastic. The one thing that I think I can now add to this conversation, thinking about the trajectory we've been on, we started off thinking the climate science and flagged that we need to take urgent action, and we saw from Gustav there that if we're going to take urgent action, we need to look at our corporate entities, our businesses, and encourage them to step up. So the question to ask is, you know, I represent a corporate entity. I'm sitting embedded in a Zurich business, working with the Zurich Foundation. What is it that Zurich is doing that is pushing on this agenda? You know, if it is our responsibility, what is it we're doing and why are we doing it? If I can take you back just a little over 18 months ago to the beginning of 2019. 2019 was probably a watershed year in terms of urgency. It suddenly became obvious to the business world, and it was kind of really brought to the fore with the appearance of Greta Thunberg at the WEF. The World Economic Forum happens every year in Davos in January 2019. We suddenly had this young Swedish schoolgirl who had been kind of running a climate strike in her own hometown for a while, on centre stage, talking to business leaders about the urgency that climate change is happening, that it needs to be addressed, we need to take it seriously, and we need to start taking that action now. Interestingly, Zurich had started that journey several years beforehand. In fact, back in 2013, when I first joined the flood resilience programme work, we started to think about the impact of climate and thinking about natural hazards as a core element of our business and core element of the ways in which we could work. And so climate has kind of been coming up on us for a while, but 2019 really saw a step change in that. In 2019, simultaneously with the appearance of Greta Thunberg, Zurich's sustainability strategy was ratified and started to be put into force. And one of the key elements of that is the response to climate change. We have a very strong belief in working towards a 1.5 degree future. There is one thing that the climate science is agreed upon, and that is the urgent need to limit global temperature rises to a maximum of 1.5 degrees C. That's still going to involve climate change. It's still going to mean that the climate is changing, but the feeling is that we can probably cope with that amount. We're currently on track, by the way, to exceed 3.5. So it's not time to get complacent yet about this thing. This is definitely a future view of what we're looking at trying to do. So in 2019, what did Zurich start doing in terms of practically bringing its sustainability strategy to life? Well, the first thing was we became the first insurer to sign up to the UN Global Compact's 1.5 degree C business pledge. Now, what that means is that we need to start taking action within our business. So it's not about giving money away or investing in projects that might help. It is about the way in which we run business. How do we do our business that enables us to push towards a 1.5 degree future? And that in turn led us to what is best described as a divestment position. We have a view that we need to be rowing back from and encouraging a transition away from very harmful extractive industries and carbon emitting fuels to work towards a net zero carbon future. We'll be working with our clients, working with our customers to look at how they transition so that no more than 30% of their business is exposed to things like thermal coal, oil sands, or oil shale. And if they can't make that transition in the medium term, we will be looking to exit from relationships with them. In other words, we'll be trying to put pressure on them to change their business models so that they contribute to the 1.5 degree target, or we will be finding ways in which we will remove ourselves from supporting them. And removing the insurance option from many of these businesses will kind of force them into rethinking their strategy and rethinking the way in which they move forward. We're also coupling that with our own initiatives internally. So we joined CDP's RE100 initiative, which basically means a move to 100% renewable energy use within the business. We're looking at stripping out paper, single-use plastics, the things you can do internally within the business so that our own contribution to the net, to the carbon emission problem is kind of reduced. We also are a huge investor. We have many billions of dollars of assets under our control, and we have signed up to the UNEP's finance initiative and joined the Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance. Now, what that means is that by 2050, the assets we invest in will have a carbon exposure of net zero by 2050. So it's definitely a move to try to encourage the places where we invest and the investments we hold to be thinking about their own carbon reduction. So if we can think about this as bringing pressure to bear on this situation, working with clients and customers, working through our investment strategy, we can try and reduce those emissions and do what we can to achieve a 1.5 degree world going forward, which is a huge incentive for others. Why do we do this? Well, frankly, if we don't, the planet will become unlivable. If it's unlivable, then the risks that we face from climate change risk will become uninsurable, and we won't have a business. So when Gustav talks about doing the right thing and making money and doing the right thing and looking at it from a sustainability point of view, if we don't look after the sustainability side, we won't have a business to make money out of. It's a very simple equation, really. So there's a huge incentive for us to kind of work in this direction. All of that is pointing at Zurich's key kind of focus, which is on the mitigation of climate change. It is looking to say, how do we try and put the brakes on this climate change as much as we can, and how do we encourage that? As I've already said, climate change is already happening, though. We've already experienced 1.1 degrees of average temperature rise. So as a result of that, communities around the world are already having to deal with that kind of climate impact. 2013, we started the flood resilience program work, which the foundation has been investing in. We extended that work again in 2018 to continue to try to build flood resilience in communities, and increasingly our understanding of what resilience is looking at helping communities deal with the climate risk, manage that climate risk, and future-proof that climate risk against future climate changes, at the same time as improving their own economic development. Their own economic development will lead them to acquire prosperity, and prosperity is good for Zurich and its business. So there is a clear linkage between us doing the right thing to support communities in this kind of way and leading on to Zurich being a credible and valuable player in the continued use of risk transfer mechanisms further on down the line. Over the last month or so, the foundation has taken the step to expand that even further. So we work now, or we will be working by the end of by the beginning of 2021 in around 20 developing world countries with a flood resilience program. We're also looking at trying to make that option localized and bringing it to our business units where they are to look to see how we can deal with climate change risk in the communities where Zurich businesses are operating, and we're reaching out to our business units and working with them to try to create local programs that also do that kind of thing. We're very much on the adaptation side in the foundation, and it goes hand in hand with the mitigation side that Zurich is promoting. So as a business, including its foundation, we are very much looking at how do you tackle this this whole idea of climate change. One, from trying to reduce it, or reduce the risk of it, and two, by dealing with the impacts that it already has. And I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Karen, Gustav, and David, for your keynotes. Very effective and very insightful. Thank you very much for that. So, couple of questions from my side, and we also have many questions lining up in our Q&A. So we will make our best to cover them all. First question for Karen. You pass us the message on the sense of urgency. So climate change is already a thing that we should have acted before. And you mentioned that governments might not be the best position in order to tackle this. And Gustav as well touched base that corporations, organizations and businesses around the world might be best positioned to do this. In your own experience, you collaborate a lot with within the private sector. What is your opinion? Do you think that corporations understand this sense of urgency around climate change and are willing to put their efforts in order to, let's say, mitigate what the governments miss to make?
Not enough yet. They're starting. one of the things that ISET has done in collaboration with the Zurich Flood Resilience Alliance is post-event reviews, going in after major flood events and looking at where was the response resilient and where wasn't it. And one of the things we've seen in those, even over the past 6 years, is sort of an evolution. Initially, companies were sort of thinking about, okay, how do I protect my physical structure from an event? And then the next step was, oh, it's not enough to protect my physical structure. I need to think about my supply chains. How do I think about either diversifying my supply chains or otherwise making sure that I'm getting the raw ingredients I need to continue operation? And then they realized even that's not enough. I need to make sure that the roads in and out, or the transportation in and out of my plant is maintained and that my workers can get to work. And I think the next obvious step is, well, how do you make sure you have workers at all? If your plant is above sea level, but all of your workers' housing isn't, they're probably going to leave unless they can live there safely somehow. And so I think the next step in just corporate sustainability and maintaining operations is going to be that, well, how do we create the conditions that society needs to live here?
Thank you very much for that, Karen. And it's encouraging and positive that corporations are not yet there, but are starting realizing and being aware of their role in order to tackle climate change. We have a couple of questions for Gustav. Your props keynote, it's hot on the, it's almost a trending topic at the moment. So we have a couple of questions for you. So one in particular, in your role of investor, is what companies are you most excited in terms of companies being successful and doing good for the environment? So when you invest or when you're looking for an investment in a specific company, what are they, for example, 1, 2, or 3 specific things that you look for?
That's a really good question. I think, for example, I'm going to put this into a context, and the context is going to be inner city mobility, because that's a space that interests me a lot right now. One would imagine, me being a sustainability nerd, that I love the great outdoors. I don't. I'm a huge inner city rat, essentially. So when I go on vacations, I only go to cities. I'm not interested in the great outdoors at all. So right now, I'm really nerding down into inner city mobility. And the reason is that there are 3 essential problems we have with inner city mobility right now. There's more, but 3 essential ones. One is local pollution. The second one is global pollution. And the third one is congestion. So if we have a look at all these 3, a lot of the people that are saying that the solution to inner city mobility is going to be electrification. So if everybody just sells their regular, gas-fueled car or diesel-fueled car and replace it with a Tesla, things are going to be good. But they're not, because the Tesla doesn't really solve all these problems, right? It only solves the kind of global emissions problem because you're going to emit less CO2. It doesn't actually solve the local emissions because you're still going to have, tires that meets the roads in the middle of the streets, and Teslas are heavy. So these roads are going to be worn by Teslas just as much as they would be by other cars. And you also have the congestion problem because Teslas are every bit as big as a normal car. So then I've kind of looked into how can we bring alternative structures and alternative ideas on how to make congestion not a problem, local emissions not a problem, and global emissions not a problem. One of the things I'm looking into right now is actually a tuk-tuk company that are bringing electric rickshaws basically over to Europe. And what they're trying to do is essentially bring a vehicle that is only 500 pounds rather than a car that would be, 2,500, 3,000 pounds. So it's a fraction of the weight. It takes 2 people in the back, and you can still get from point A to point B really efficiently. And that would solve basically all 3 problems. And if you can add a sprinkle of access economy on top of this, you can get something really exciting. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to solve problems with pretty much tailored solution to that each problem. And that's where the companies need to come in from. So they need to be able to solve a specific problem in a specific context. And they need to do that basically best of class. And they need to be able to be the market leader in that space. in order for me to be interested in investing. So I would say that that's kind of the main ingredients of what I'm looking for. And in this case, it will be inner city mobility, but it could be a lot of other things as well. I'm invested in co-working spaces, for example. So I look into that. I'm invested in software, obviously. I'm also invested in inner city logistics and last mile delivery systems. So a lot of interesting things when it comes to making things more sustainable. But, and this is the big but, they need to be successful as well financially, because the driver for virtually every entrepreneur is changing the world, yes, but also there needs to be a sprinkle of financial success put into there. So if you only have kind of the make the world better a place kind of ideal, I don't think we're going to achieve the change that we need quickly enough.
And actually touch base already on another question that we received from the audience that was directly to you, Gustav. So what companies could do more, for example, like Zurich and its employees, to do good, keeping in mind that we also need to be profitable. So how, if you have any tips or if you have any suggestions, how companies can, let's say, find the perfect match between doing good for the planet and also for society, but also keeping their profits. Do you see any trends that you can share with us in the companies you invest, or being yourself an entrepreneur?
Well, number one, give David more money. I mean, he's sitting here. He's nodding. You can't see him, but he's nodding his head right now. So give David more money. But I think one thing that I'm really interested in right now, other than inner city mobility, it's actually access economy. So usually you put Uber into the access economy. I'm not a big fan of that. I think access economy is essentially anything that you can rent within a short period of time. And I think that's pretty interesting because there are so many things that you can actually rent right now. If you want to get in touch with me, send me a message on LinkedIn, and I'm going to send you a picture, a slide of all the companies that I found that where you can rent their goods. And that includes shoes, bridesmaids, wedding cakes, dogs, chicken. You can actually rent a coffin today. So the interesting thing is if you can rent a coffin and get buried in a rent-a-coffin, I think that's going to change a lot. And that's also going to change the insurance industry, because all of a sudden you're going to have so many new touch points of actually selling insurance to people. Because rather than owning a car and buying insurance for it all the time, you're going to rent a car and you're going to pick it up on the street and you're going to leave it on the street. Maybe 25 minutes later, you want to have that insured some way. So I think when it comes to insurance and access economy, that's going to be incredibly interesting, but it's also going to put a lot of demands on how you can actually use that insurance and only insure something for example, then 25 minutes, or in the example, if you have a power drill, only get insured when you're actually pushing the button to drill, because that's when you're going to get hurt with it. I think if you start thinking about those questions, I think you're getting on the way.
Thank you very much, Gustav. I'm switching now to Karen back again. We have a question with regard how to create awareness and how to make this sense of urgency, how to pass this sense of urgency within corporations and in society. And the specific question is the following. Despite climate change being such a big threat, if not our biggest, there is a big proportion that still makes it a matter of belief. A choice of comfort, yet dangerous as it creates indifference. How do you think this can be tackled? And what do you suggest as to be done more to grow not only awareness, but prompt action? Being yourself collaborating within the private sector and also being, let's say, relating with different stakeholders from the public sector and the private one. How do you think we can raise this awareness and make it more, let's say, it's hard facts, it comes from science. So how this is still something that people debates, I believe it or I don't believe it. What can we do in the awareness space and education space?
So I think we've gotten most of the way that we're going to get in the education space. You know, the information is out there and the people who are going to believe it. And everybody else is digging into their trenches until they see it themselves, or until the people around them with whom their values align start shifting their opinions. And so I think the two most powerful entry points for really shifting the climate debate are listening well and listening people out of their position. basically. Understanding like what are the underlying reasons that they've adopted this, and how do you start shifting that, and modeling what we want to see in the world. Because there's really interesting studies about how the people around you affect you, but it goes both ways. You will affect the people around you, and if you just put out there, you know, how you want the world to be, that will influence the people around you, both consciously and subconsciously.
Thank you very much, Karen. We have a couple of questions for David. So one is, what does David think Zurich can learn from other companies in terms of tangible actions being taken? I guess within the financial sector or in general, there's a lot of also experience sharing with other corporations. Is it something that you do within the Zurich Foundation or within Zurich that we can see what initiatives and actions can be taken as inspiration from other companies?
Well, I think what it boils down to is trying to understand why other companies might be interested in the first place, and then seeking out those for whom it makes sense to focus on dealing with stuff. So if you think about Zurich as an insurer, it makes absolute sense for us to have got engaged with things that are around natural hazard risk. It's a huge issue. It's a huge risk issue. It's one where there is clear evidence of kind of a protection gap between the amount lost and the amount insured. So there is a scope in there for which the business could be doing better in terms of providing more and more effort into that. And so as a result, we kind of drifted into or focused in on that kind of issue. And so as a result of that, I think the places where we can learn are from businesses that have a similar kind of connection into the climate change debates. Now that may well be water management kind of companies. It may well be organisations that deal with transport and transport infrastructure. It may well be organisations that are looking at risk and risk management. There's a wide variety of organisations out there. One of the challenges, I think, is that the corporate sector, generally speaking, operates with a very kind of competition first kind of approach. And if there's one thing that I think we've learned through the Flood Resilience Alliance is that collaboration is the way to solve these big problems, rather than competition as if you're the only one who can solve them. And I think that is something that we are actively pursuing. For example, in Mexico, we've had conversations with the AXA Foundation. AXA is a huge, great competitor for Zurich, so we will fight each other tooth and nail to sell insurance to people. But in terms of dealing with flood resilience and looking at this whole kind of climate change piece, we are looking at very much how do we collaborate, how do we share the stuff that we've learned with them, how do we learn from them. And so it's about dialogue to a large extent. I haven't seen a huge amount of innovation from the corporate sector in terms of the way in which they're dealing with resilience, but I think that's largely because most corporations that I've come across are still sitting in this response kind of phase. So they see a disaster and they respond to it, and there's a lot of effort and work that goes on in that space. And our aim, I think, is to look at how we influence change with them as much as how we learn from them.
Great, and I think you also touched base in this last answer to another question that we have. So how much are we shifting from, let's say, from a mitigation or let's say fixing ex post the damages or what we see within the communities, and shifting this approach towards prevention? You touched base within your keynote and also in the previous question, but how much do you think that we should shift more our actions and initiatives towards prevention instead of mitigation? How important is this change in mindset?
Well, I think it's really difficult to separate it out, because mitigation and working to try to try to put a cap on how much the climate is changing is a vital part of whether or not we'll even survive as a species. So that there is a kind of a fundamental underlying piece to needing to do mitigation, needing to promote mitigation, and to do the work we can. And certainly the way in which Zurich has approached this and the kind of the structure of the business has started to focus on what it can do in that space. Where the role of the foundation is different, and I think this is where we can complement each other really well, is to follow up behind that, recognising that the climate is changing already. There is an immediate need to look at vulnerable people and the way in which they are impacted, and see how you can work with them to overcome that vulnerability. Now, as I said, I think I said it in the keynote, there's a kind of long-term aim of that as well. It's not just about helping people today become less vulnerable, but by doing so, you develop them economically. They prosper, and they're likely to have more prosperous futures. And if they have more prosperous futures, they are in a position where they have something to lose, where the risk will be something which they need to try and mitigate against or to work with, and which makes insurance as a relevant instrument for them to use. So from a Zurich point of view, we focus on the mitigation side and have that kind of drive from a business point of view, knowing that by putting money through the foundation into community, we're also building community strength behind it. That in the long run is going to secure the business for the future. And if I can just sort of add on a little bit to that, something that Gustav was talking about, I think one of the things about this balance between profit and working with climate change is also to do with how you view profit, and whether you view it as essential in Q1, Q2, Q3, or whether you can view it as building over time. And thinking on the long-term time horizon, profit delayed is like delayed gratification. It's all better when you get to it in the end. And sometimes you may need to say, let's kind of see how we can evolve a profitable long-term future rather than extract as much profit as we can from a short-term future.
Well, very well put. I think it's very important. You also touched base earlier in your keynote, the relationship between business and thought leadership. It actually leads also to one of the questions from the audience that says there are countries more aware than others and have seen more severe measures to prevent climate change. Does culture affect these policies and initiatives? So what is your view around culture? We've been speaking around corporate culture, so what we can do within corporations, but what do you think also, what is the role of individuals in order to tackle climate change? Which tangible actions or initiatives can each of us bring forward, ideally from after this event today? So if any of you wants to cover this question, giving a bit more, let's say we covered governments failed or didn't do enough. Corporations might be the guys that could tackle climate change, but us as individuals, what can we practically and tangibly do in order to do our own part in order to tackle climate change?
So I can have some fun with this actually, because I've done something like this at work. I used to be a Greenpeace activist 20 years ago. So I've basically spent a lot of time reading up on the science, and I've been very, how shall we say it, combative. And many people think it's kind of interesting to go from a Greenpeace activist to a venture capitalist. But to be honest, it's pretty much the same. It's the belief that an individual can change the world. Toolbox is a little bit different, but the goal is the same. So one of the things I've become really interested in when it comes to the individual portion is water consumption. And one would imagine that water might not be a big issue because, well, there's plenty of it, especially up here in Sweden, where I'm from. But as it turns out, water is a major problem when it comes to both global sustainability, of course, but it's also a big emitter both when it comes to chemicals and cleaning and when it comes to carbon emissions, when it comes to transporting water. So I decided to have some fun with the employees at work. I did a calculation looking at for how long would you be capable of showering if you want to stay within the confines of the water allowance we have in the world here today. So I did a calculation. As it turns out, the global kind of recommendation is that you should only use about 30 liters of water every day. And if you look in Europe, it's the best in Europe are actually in Spain. You use about 105 liters of water per person per day in Spain for your basic human needs. In Sweden, we kind of suck. We're at 180 liters of water. If we come to the US, Karen, you guys are, you know, way off. You're at about 400 liters per person per day, actually. But we did a kind of a challenge then in saying that, okay, you're only allowed to shower for 2 minutes every day. I did this with every employee at work. I'm the boss, so I get to tell them what to do. So I said, you're only allowed a 2-minute shower every day. And then you get to try it out and see if you can actually live with a 2-minute shower every day. For a week, they were fine. I mean, people were showering for like a minute. And after the kind of week when we tried this was up, everybody was like, yeah, I mean, I could do this probably, but I am going to miss those, you know, 15, 20-minute showers we have during the weekends. So whenever you kind of look at what you can do as an individual today, it all comes down to making your quality of life worse. And I've got a beef with that. I've got a big problem with that basic idea. I think it's up to companies to become more innovative and provide solutions to customers that can do both. I keep coming back to it. You need to be able to do both, provide a better experience and make it more sustainable. And when it comes to the shower, there are actually solutions for that. I'm not going to bring them up here, but there are interesting solutions where you can actually take a shower and you can only use, you know, 25 liters of water. That's no problem at all, and have an amazing experience. There's actually Swedish companies, Italian companies, US companies working with this right now. So what I would suggest to people is, rather than buying into the basic idea of always making your life worse, be innovative. Look around you. What kind of companies do you have around you right now that can provide something really interesting for you to try, that can make your life, if not more interesting, well, then better and more sustainable? Because the solutions are, in many cases, there. They're just done by small companies that haven't really found global manufacturing yet. So you're going to have to pay a little bit more, but you're going to get some really cool experiences in doing so. So do look on the innovative side. That would be my suggestion as an individual.
Thank you very much, Gustav. Karen, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I would just add, I think that's a really good point, that so often when we look at the whole climate change question, the focus is on what do I have to give up? And we're, as a species, we're really bad about imagining how much better it could be. And I think that's one of our biggest challenges with climate change is, how can we imagine the society we could live in? And instead of focusing on what we lose, focus on what we have to gain.
David?
So I think, Nicoletta, that the answer here is something that the foundation is moving towards, and our strapline is about being the activist, or bringing out the activist in all of us. I think that the one thing that individuals can very much do is be evangelical about the subject. Talk to lots of people about the opportunities that they've got to change the small things, to do the small things, to look for alternative solutions. It doesn't mean that you have to give everything up. It doesn't mean that you have to change your lifestyle so it's unrecognizable necessarily, but it does mean making a huge effort to convince others to take the action. We can all change light bulbs to, you know, low emission and low energy light bulbs. We can all move to renewable energies, all this kind of stuff. But in order to do so, we need to have the opportunity to do so. And so I think being evangelical, particularly talking to the companies we want to be better at doing things, talking to communities where we want to do things better, and talking to politicians where we want them to do things better, effectively trying to kind of bring them to the point where they feel that they have to move. I think that's part of the challenge for us, is how do we create that pressure so that people want to move in the general direction to improve the way in which we live and effectively create a planet which we can all live on.
Thank you very much. We are approaching towards the end of our session. So thank you very much to our speakers and also for everyone that we didn't manage to cover all the questions, unfortunately, but feel free to post them at next@zurich.com and we will pass them to the speakers. So allow me to wrap up this session today with the key takeaways that I got personally from our speakers. So Karen started, let's say, passing us the message of the urgency of the climate change issue. And she mentioned that governments did part of the job, but didn't complete or did fully or at the up to speed that the actions and initiatives should be put. So corporations are the best placed in order to tackle climate change. And we are already late in this run. Gustav made us visualize very effectively how corporations are actually having everything that is needed in order to tackle climate change. And we can actually, you can't see it, but the prop is still there with all the different countries and the company that rates in between of couple of countries. So Gustav made us very much aware of the role of the corporations and also gave us some practical tips, being himself an entrepreneur and an investor, what to look from a sustainability point of view into companies while investing or within companies themselves. David later on touched base on the balance between prevention and mitigation, and he made us all aware about the importance of building resilience within communities and all the great initiatives that the Zurich Foundation is putting in place all around the world in order to make communities more resilient. We also heard about the role of innovation within companies, because both Karen and Gustav mentioned that the point is not what do we need to give up in order to tackle climate change, but what can we do also us as individuals in order to let's say, to stop or let's say decrease the climate change that is happening. But that doesn't mean that we need to give up on something, but we can be creative and see things in an innovative way in order to come up with solutions and initiatives in order to tackle climate change. So thank you very much again to our speakers. Allow me the last minute of this session to bring up all the great, amazing events that we have within the virtual summit. So as you can see on the screen, yesterday we had our Future of Generations at Zurich event, and today in the morning we cover Future of Economy, and this session here, Future of Earth. Tomorrow we have an event focusing on Future of Corporate Social Innovation, where we had the chair of the Zurich Foundation, Gary Shaughnessy, and our own Joel Aggard, Innovation Strategist at Zurich. And on the panel, we also have an external speaker, Mariana Carvalho, that is one of our 2019 Wang Yang Award Scholarship recipients. On Thursday, the last day of our virtual summit, we will have two events again. In the morning, at the CET morning, we will have the Future of Work event, where we have two of our own internal speakers, Christine Alter and Nadia Younes, representing, let's say, the Zurich part, and an external speaker, Simona Scarpaleggia, that she's the CEO of Edge and former CEO of Zurich, Switzerland. And our last but not least at all event of the virtual summit will be Future of Society on Thursday afternoon, where we will have our own Siwon Lu, CEO of Zurich Insurance Mobile Solutions, and two external speakers, Ronnie Abergel, from this, he is the CEO of the Human Library Organization, and Bill Kearney, business professor and entrepreneur and DJ. So these are the 3 events that are going to come up tomorrow and on Thursday. So make sure that you register. If you're an internal within Zurich, you can register directly via our corporate workplace. If you're an external, you can either follow the link that you can see on the screen, or you can also register via our Zurich.com portal on our page dedicated to Next. So we very much look forward to see you in the next events upcoming. Remember that these events are also recorded, so you can replay them at any point in time. And thank you very much again to our amazing speakers of today, Karen, Gustav, and David. And I wish everybody a great rest of the day or rest of the morning according to your locations.